Welcome back to Hunting the Haunted here on the Paranormal Network. We dissect and discuss famous, infamous, and not so well-known cases of paranormal activity, ranging from hauntings to alien abductions and Bigfoot sightings. I'm your co-host, Jason Hewlett, and this time we're discussing the true story behind the Conjuring House.
The story first hit pop culture when The Conjuring was released in 2013. It was both a critical and commercial success. Many assumed that the story was largely made up, but it was indeed based on an actual case files of Ed and Lorraine Warren, noted paranormal investigators and demonologists. And, as if any case like this, liberties were taken.
The real Perron family lived in the farmhouse depicted in the movie for approximately 10 years. Located in the small county town of Harrisville, Rhode Island, Roger Perron and his wife Carolyn purchased the home in the winter of 1970. The 200-acre property offered plenty of space for them to raise their 5 daughters, Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cynthia, and April. They moved out in June of 1980. The Warrens investigated the goings-on during the 1970s.
What's interesting is the Perron family put their support behind the movie and claim only minor discrepancies. Lorraine Warren also acted as a consultant on the movie, which was directed by James Wan.
Various members of the Perron family, who were friends with producer Tony DeRosa Grund, also visited the Willington, North Carolina set. Andrea Perron has been the most vocal of the group, likely because she self-published a book about the haunting, while her sister Christine has been the most reluctant to talk about her experiences in the house. At this point, Peter, what kind of alarm bells should be going off in an investigator's head?
Primarily the place, I guess the basis of this. There's been a number of credible investigators over the years since this story came to light that have actually visited the place, and to be honest with you, there hasn't been much noted activity in relation to evidence, which is kind of the first tick off the list. And it's people that I, know and respect in the field as well. Also, on the flip side of that, with the name Warren, that also puts into question the authenticity of exactly what happened there. I'm not, obviously, with the history and the documentation that came out of this story, I'm not debating that something happened, but I'm obviously questioning in my head the authenticity of the accounts and the reports that came from the Warrens and certain members of the family.
So what actually happened? In January 1971, the Perron family moved into a 14-room farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island, where Carolyn, Roger, and their 5 daughters began to notice strange things happening almost immediately. It started small. Carolyn would notice that the broom went missing or seemed to move from place to place on its own. She would hear the sound of something scraping against the kettle in the kitchen when no one was in there. She'd find small piles of dirt in the center of a newly cleaned kitchen floor. The girls began to notice spirits around the house, though for the most part, they were harmless. There were a few, however, that were angry. Carolyn allegedly researched the history of the home and discovered that it had been in the same family for 8 generations, and that many of them had died under mysterious or horrible circumstances. Several of the children had drowned in a nearby creek. One was murdered, and a few of them hanged themselves in the attic. The spirit that was depicted in the film with Sheba was the worst of them all, and if you believe the movie, she tried to possess Carolyn.
Was there any third parties that actually validated that any of these incidences were going on at all?
Not so much, just historical records, and then, obviously the Warren family when they investigated, plus anyone else that was involved.
I've researched this case before, and it's kind of, this story, there isn't much detail into the story or anything like that.
So what do you think about the validity of it then, Peter?
If you look at the basic premises of this investigation, and I'm not saying that the family kind of sat around and made things up, but you have a third party that comes in called the Warrens that, first and foremost, I question their validity because of things that have happened before and things that come out the woodwork about their authenticity. And then you have a family as well where some of the members of the family have come forward, willing to make statements about what went on, but there's slight discrepancies in their stories. Each member of the family has a different story, and none of them seem to line up, which kind of makes me suspicious on that. I don't know. I think there's a lot of variables in this, and there's a lot of variables in the story. I wouldn't put a lot of trust behind it. I think that it was just another get-rich-quick scheme just to make another movie.
What's interesting as well, Peter, is there was a Bathsheba Sherman who lived in a neighboring farm in the 1800s. Now, suspicion grew when an infant mysteriously died in her care. When the baby was examined, it was determined that the mortal wound was caused by a large sewing needle that had been impaled at the base of the child's skull. Though the townspeople believed that Bathsheba sacrificed the infant as an offering to the devil, due to insufficient evidence, a court found that she was innocent of any wrongdoing. Despite her name being cleared legally, the public was not convinced. Many believed her to be a witch or a Satanist, but this is all local folklore, much like when we discussed the Salem witch trials a few months back. So what are your thoughts then on witchcraft and Satanism?
Both witchcraft and Satanism is a form of religion. There are, there's negative sides to it, and there's also, religious positive aspects to it as well. Obviously, with witchcraft, there's white witches and there's dark witches as well, with things like that, and with Satanism as well. That religion was actually based on atheists and people who just didn't believe in Christ. So on the flip side of that, and then bearing in mind that we were back in that kind of that culture with the witch trials as well, with this kind of religious town, the finger then gets pointed at witchcraft and Satanism, which there was no true evidence of that ever occurring.
Okay, and here's a little bit of a tidbit too, Peter. The family's connection to Bathsheba Sherman came from Ed and Lorraine Warren. Carolyn Perrin told Ed and Lorraine about an incident that happened a few years earlier. She said that she had been lying on the sofa and all of a sudden felt a piercing type of pain in her calf, and then the muscle began to spasm. Upon examination, she noticed a puddle of blood at the point of impact. She checked for bees or anything else that could cause the puncture in her leg, but found nothing. In her daughter's book, Andrea Perrin describes the wound as a perfectly concentric circle, as if a large sewing needle had impaled her skin. When Carolyn told Ed and Lorraine Warren this story, in conjunction with the tale of Bathsheba Sherman, who had been suspected of killing an infant with a knitting needle, Lorraine suggested that Bathsheba Sherman could have taken the needle with her to the afterlife and used it to stab Carolyn in the calf. I can see you're laughing. From that point on, Lorraine Warren referred to the demonic presence in the Perrin house as Bathsheba. Now, you've already mentioned several times during this episode, you're just sort of lack of belief in what the Warrens are saying. And I'm like you, they've kind of come up as sham artists, especially since Lorraine has passed away, and people, I think, feel more free to talk about this, Peter. What do you think? Like, as investigators, we're not supposed to make leaps of faith in terms of trying to piece things together. We need hard facts, and that doesn't sound like there's any real hard facts to back up any of that.
With just that last statement you made, it kind of seems to me that someone overstepped a threshold of what we should be doing as an investigator and to help people with things like that, because a lot of the times with past experiences where they're so-called mediums and psychics and stuff like that, and they've made statements to that effect or more, without actual concrete proof, there's no way of validating exactly what's going on out there. With that statement, with the cramps in the leg and that kind of thing, she could have diabetes. It could be a sign of diabetes or anything like that. With the blood and the circle, it could be anything. Like you could have knocked it. I knock my leg sometimes and I don't notice I've made myself bleed or anything like that, but it just seems a bit funny that there was just a perfect circle as well. Well,
I mean, it could be bug bite. Like there's 1,000 other explanations other than a long dead accused witch with the alleged sewing needle coming back from the grave and stabbing you in the leg with it.
Going back to what I said before, it's the aspect of being a paranormal investigator and overstepping that threshold of what we should be doing as investigators. Sometimes things are said, rather than helping the situation, you could actually be feeding the fire with fear.
According to the movie, Ed and Lorraine managed to prevent Carolyn from being possessed by Bathsheba, which of course prevents her from murdering her daughters, which Carolyn apparently never tried to do. Of course, the story doesn't stop with the movie, as allegedly every owner since the parents have reported some level of paranormal activity, including doors opening and closing by themselves, people hearing disembodied voices, and seeing shadows move about. Now, Peter, you've talked a bit about how you've researched the case. What have you heard about the Conjuring House in terms of there being actual real activity still lingering there? You kind of mentioned earlier that it hasn't been as active as people make it out to be.
I know a number of credible investigators that have visited the Conjuring House, and not just investigators from the States. It has attracted a lot of attention worldwide, and it has had a lot of people go through there. And I'm very curious in places specifically like this, where there's been a lot of attention, and what kind of evidence has been pulled out of these places. And nothing's ever come forward that credible, in my book, in relation to the activity that was supposed to have gone on there. I mean, the actual movie itself, they enhance things in the movie and stuff like that, but supposedly it was based on things that went on in the house. And with things like that, you would expect, to walk into to Satan's grotto as soon as you walk into a place with, things flying off the wall and that kind of thing, but nothing happened.
The story has resurfaced recently, Peter, in the documentary The Sleepless Unrest, the real story of the Conjuring House, which follows a team of filmmakers and paranormal investigators as they spend 2 full weeks in the house, which current owners Corey and Jennifer Heinzen, who seem so eager to share their experiences in the home that they let people stay there, apparently for up to 2 weeks. The documentary is very much in line with most shows like Ghost Hunters and Paranormal State. It's entertaining, but one just doesn't know if they can buy into what you're watching. Because I always question, Peter, people trying to profit off of things like this, especially owners, like, we're going to buy the house and we're going to let you stay here. And I went on YouTube while researching this, and they've let a lot of people go in there and investigate. Like YouTubers. As we want to believe, we could go and just sign up and go in for a night. So the documentary, the film, people profiting off of letting people come and investigate there. Like, what does that scream to you?
It's showing trends off of our previous shows, things like the Amityville and things like that. To me, it's just showing that someone's trying to make money out of perhaps a story that got exaggerated. For me to discount that there's no paranormal activity in there, and for those guys that I knew to go in there to discount the fact that there's no paranormal activity in there, is pretty naive of me without actually, properly investigating the place, that kind of thing. But for all of the TV shows, the TV shows, the movies, the documentaries, that kind of thing, and someone's getting a pretty penny out of what's apparently gone on in there, and it just kind of makes you wonder whether it's authentic or not.
Well, I think, as sort of a final thought, when we can get safely across the border, we need to take the We Want to Believe team there and find out for ourselves.
I would gladly spend 2 weeks in there, and I would gladly love to prove all the TV shows and all the documentary shows that have been made to make that thrill factor kick in, that there's nothing going on in there. And it's easy for me to judge through a mailbox what's going on in there, but this is kind of classic what's gone on other cases as well, where you've got a scenario of a family, and you've got a third party that has zero credibility as well, and there's no third party, there's no other people that witness things. There's no, like, for example, the Enfield poltergeist, there was police officers and stuff like that has slightly more lean to credibility than what this has. Again, it's Warren's going in the house with a family, and there could be stuff going on in there, but they could have been, minor stuff going on in there, and the Warrens may have ignited the fire.
There's one way to find out. All right, that wraps up this episode of Hunting the Haunted. We'll be back with another investigation next month. Until then, thank you for watching our show. I'm Jason Hewlett.
And I'm Peter Renn. Stay spooky.
Please give us a like, leave a comment, and hit the bell to receive updates on all our great content. We're an independent company and appreciate your support. Until then, stay spooky.